It's over. It's finally over. The dark black hole that was October for boxing fans is finally in the past. And now we're running up with some really, really great fights here in November. I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly. You're watching the Neutral Corner for the week of November 5th. Danuch is back. Oh man, it feels good to be back, guys. New issue of Boxing Monthly is out, and of course, ran the cover, the fight of the month, really the fight of the year, the matchup of the year between Kovalev and Ward. I did a preview video breaking it all down recently. If you haven't checked that out, make sure you do. Real good article in here this month from Ron Borges about the PBC. I don't know how good you can see that there. And some of the issues facing them. Not talking about finances, not hating on Al Heyman, just talking about the fact that there are not enough stars, and the stars that they do have don't fight enough. Beating a dead horse coming from me, but a really, really good piece with some new points of view on it. I recommend you guys check it out, among all the other good stuff that's in this issue. Man, it has been an interesting October. I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second, but this past weekend I went to a wedding, my friend's wedding, Jeff in Sydney. Congratulations, you guys. Tiffany and I had a blast. Here's a few photos from the reception later on that night. As you see here, we were intoxicated slightly and crashing the photo booth with all the costumes and stuff. It was a lot of fun. The funnest part for me, though, or the most interesting part, was earlier during the actual wedding itself, during the ceremony. Tiffany had never been to a Catholic wedding. And this was a Roman Catholic wedding. And I grew up Roman Catholic almost by default. Whatever your heritage is, whatever part of it you come from, if you are any part of the Latin heritage, whether you're from Latin America, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, whatever it is, you're almost born and raised Roman Catholic by default. And I was no exception to that. So I went to a bunch of Roman Catholic weddings and funerals and all that stuff, and almost every weekend, you know, because I had a big family growing up. So I'm used to the standing up and sitting down and the prayers and singing about blood and the body of Christ and all this bloody, gory stuff, and it's almost kind of melancholy, right? And for Tiffany, she's just never seen that. So it was interesting to get her point of view on that, because she's used to weddings being very quick. You're in, you're out, everyone's happy, cheery. But the Catholic thing, it was a long, drawn-out mass, and it was standing up and sitting down and all this discipline and mercy and, you know, blood and guts kind of talk, and she had never seen that. So it was just kind of funny from a cultural standpoint, getting somebody's point of view on that. But anyway, enough with that. Again, congratulations, Jeff and Cindy Joyner. And let's get into a little news and notes and talk about some of the things that happened during Dark-tober, as they're calling it. Dark-tober, for the most part, sucked, but there was some fight action. I'll get into that a little bit later. As far as news and notes go, for me, the Neutral Corner was dark in October, like most of the boxing schedule. But you guys, if you've kept up with my channel, you see that I made several rant videos. And one of them in particular was addressing the YouTube boxing community, which I consider myself part of, and other entities that I work with, like Undisputed Champion Network. We're part of the YouTube boxing community, but apparently there's one little chunk of it that I had never heard of previously called the LTBC. And some of those guys were not very happy with some of my criticisms of the YouTubers out there. And I had to make a response video, and there was a bunch of back and forth, a bunch of controversy. And now there's a million videos talking shit and hating on me out there. Search for them. They're pretty damn funny. Some of them are just really, really horrible. But if you want a good laugh, some of them are kind of funny. And some of them are mildly entertaining. So check them out. But that was a lot of fun. But buzzkills, okay? We got just canceled fight after canceled fight for different reasons. You guys, I made videos about the Golovkin-Jacobs thing, which was just a complete mess. I still have faith that that fight's going to happen next March. It won't happen in February. Some people have talked about February. It's going to happen in March. I still think it happens in New York. I really, really do think that with the PBC's money troubles and everything, the fight's going to happen. Jacobs and his team got to realize that's the best chance for money they have. But the Orlando Salido Takashi Miura fight that was going to be on December 17th here in Los Angeles, that thing, of course, is scrapped because Orlando Salido got injured. And I don't think they're going to redo it. They're not going to reschedule it. I just think it's altogether scrapped, which really sucks. The Anthony Joshua-Vladimir Klitschko fight. Of course, as I've said before, I don't think Klitschko is going to fight for the rest of the year. Well, then he goes ahead and announces he has an injury. There you go. He's not going to fight again this year. Anthony Joshua is still fighting again on December 10th, but he's fighting Eric Molina, the guy that Chris Arreola knocked out in a round, and the guy that I think went 9 rounds with Deontay Wilder a year or two ago. Look, the version that got knocked out in the round against Chris Arreola was really a part-time boxer. And he was still a part-time boxer against Deontay Wilder, but a much more focused and experienced fighter. I actually think he's going to take Anthony Joshua a few rounds. I know a lot of people are upset about that fight being made, but with such short notice, who do you want Anthony Joshua to fight? I do think it's an interesting measuring stick. And as I've said a bunch of times, Anthony Joshua, yes, he holds a world title. He's still a prospect. That title is paper thin, okay? It was Vladimir Klitschko's, and then Tyson Fury won it. He got stripped because of the whole situation there. I won't even get into it because it was originally because he was supposed to rematch Vladimir Klitschko. That fight never happened. So it was a giant clusterfuck. It basically was handed to Charles Martin and Al Heyman, who basically sold it to Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua. But the guy's still a prospect. So at this stage of his career, at the last second, fighting Eric Molina, I don't mind. It'll be interesting to see the crowd he does in Manchester. This will be Anthony Joshua's first fight in the Manchester arena. I still think he'll do a big sellout crowd, but it'll be interesting, right? And I do believe they'll try to get Luis Ortiz in that undercard. He has a fight coming up, but should it be successful, they might throw him on that as well. They're going to throw a couple fighters on that card to stack it, and I think it'll do well. Let's see, what else? Okay, some fights that actually got announced. And for Showtime Boxing, their schedule looks really, really solid. First, PBC in general, Danny Garcia coming back against Samuel Vargas, November 12th in Philly. That's going to be on Spike TV. Nobody really gives a shit about that fight. I understand. But he's supposed to take on Keith Thurman March 4th next year, should he be successful. And that's a really good matchup. That's a fight that should have happened already a year or so ago. But the fact that it's finally going to happen, that's a nice fight. And Showtime just announced, of course, they're going to have the Anthony Joshua fight coming up. But they're going to have, finally, the Charlo J-Rock fight is going to be December 10th. That's going to be here in Los Angeles. I'll probably be ringside for that one. That's a really, really good matchup. And that's a good card altogether with Cuellar Mares, too, topping that card. Frampton and Leo Santa Cruz doing a rematch January 28th. Their first fight was really good. It was one of the better fights of 2016. I like that they're doing a rematch so soon after that first fight. We need to see more of that type of action from PBC. But again, PBC is only half of that equation, right? Because Frampton isn't, I think he's advised by Al Heyman, but he has a different promoter. So that's kind of a unification of different folks coming together to make that happen. I like that it's happening so soon. January 14th, we're finally getting the fight between James DeGale and Badou Jack that I think will determine the top man at 168 pounds. I believe that it'll start a new lineage at 168 because I think that's your clear number 1 and number 2 in the super middleweight division right now. So, and by the way, that Charlo Williams card, December 10th, here at the Galen Center, which is actually the University of Southern California, right down the street from me, just a couple miles away. That will be the first fight card put on by Ringstar Promotions. Richard Schaefer making his comeback. He says he's going to work independently of Al Heyman, but his first card is an Al Heyman card. So I think you can expect him to pretty much be one of the promoters, probably the premier promoter over the next few years that Al Heyman's going to use for his PBC cards. Speaking of Richard Schaefer and Golden Boy Promotions and Al Heyman and all that good stuff, today, November 1st, started the deposition in the Golden Boy Promotions Al Heyman antitrust lawsuit. Seen some rumblings of what was said and what happened on Twitter. I think more is going to come. As I said long ago when all this stuff started, I don't think too much is going to come from that lawsuit. I just think there's going to be a bunch of bickering back and forth. Maybe some sort of cash settlement will be reached. I don't even think that will happen. I think in the end, all this is going to be dropped and it's just much ado about nothing really. But we might get to learn, if there is a positive from it, we might get to learn a little bit more about some of these PBC Al Heyman fighter contracts, which I think a lot of fans are very curious about. So that's a good thing. I talked about Luis Ortiz earlier. He just signed with Matchroom Promotions with Eddie Hearn, which I think is a really big move. Eddie Hearn, in my opinion, is a runaway for Promoter of the Year in 2016. But they're bringing him back in action against Malik Scott in Monte Carlo, November 12th. That fight's going to be on HBO. And then, of course, we have Kovalev Ward on the 19th. That's HBO pay-per-view. And then we have Lomachenko-Walters, November 26th on regular HBO. And, of course, they're going to do the Kovalev Ward replay before Lomachenko-Walters on November 26th. So if you don't want to buy the pay-per-view and you're an HBO subscriber, wait a week, bam, you get to watch both of the fights. Another good fight coming up December 3rd, Denis Lebedev going up against Murat Gassiev. I think that's a great cruiserweight fight. And, you know, if Gassiev can pull that upset, you know, he's a live dog. It's over in Moscow, so you got to favor Lebedev just based on experience and everything, but also because it's over there. But if Gassiev can pull that upset or make it a really super competitive fight, that sparks new life in that division. And I think cruiserweight is set up for big things in 2017, man. I talked about that December 10th date, which was originally, for HBO, was originally Canelo Alvarez's date. Then it was supposed to be, Canelo Alvarez got injured. It was supposed to be, they were leaving it open for Golovkin-Jacobs. And of course, that fight fell apart. So now Terrence Crawford is getting that date. He's going up against John Molina. I believe that will be in Omaha, Nebraska. And this will be regular HBO. And I think they're going to put a co-feature on there that hasn't been announced yet. December 16th, HBO. Vasyslav Sabransky going up against Sullivan Barrera on HBO Latino. That's a Friday night card. That is a really good fight. Do not sleep on that fight. I actually think Shabransky is going to stop Sullivan Barrera just because of the style matchup. I think he's going to eat some leather, and I think there's going to be some great two-way action, but I expect a late stoppage for Shabransky, and that's going to kind of put him on the map. So if you don't have HBO Latino, find a stream of that fight. And I'm still trying to find out if Ring TV will be streaming that fight. If I do find out about that, absolutely I'll let you guys know. But the following night, December 17th, Bernard Hopkins is going up against Joe Smith Jr., the guy who scored the runaway, I think, for upset of the year against Andres Fanfare earlier in the summer. This is supposed to be Hopkins' farewell fight. And some people groaned when this fight was announced. But man, look, B-Hop is in his 50s. And he's taking on a guy who doesn't have the experience, doesn't have the craft and all that, but has the power. This is not a walkover fight for Bernard Hopkins. I think it's actually going to be a pretty interesting, entertaining fight. And I know who the co-feature is going to be. In fact, I talked to the promoter just earlier this week, but I am sworn to secrecy until they announce it. I'll just say this much. The co-feature to that Bernard Hopkins, Joe Smith card is a young, undefeated fighter that is going to be fighting for a title at some point next year. So more to come on that, but good, strong co-feature. I think you guys will like it. What else, man? Throughout the month of October, that's pretty much it. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of action in the ring. There was a lot of action outside of it with bickering back and forth, the usual Twitter talk between fighters who just should put up or shut up. But let's go into a quick review of the couple of fights we did see last month during Dark-tober. Real quick, on October 1st, Nathan Cleverly scored a 6th round retirement win over the German fighter Jürgen Bräumer. This was for the WBA light heavyweight title that Cleverly now took off of Bräumer's hands. There's talk of a rematch. Bräumer was apparently injured, and that's why he retired in his corner. Look, I've been very critical of the German fighter because he just hasn't fought anybody. He hasn't taken any big challenges. I think they looked at Cleverly as a fight that they could win. I don't know if it was wrapped up in a sanctioning body. This might have been a mandatory fight, but good for Cleverly. He's taken challenges. Yeah, for a long time, he milked it as well. But in the last few years, man, look, he fought Sergey Kovalev. He's taken on challenges since then. He's traveled on the road. So good for him that he got this title. If they do the rematch with Bräumer, we'll see what happens in the rematch. It was very, very competitive the first time around, and Bräumer had success when he boxed. But if they don't do the rematch, or if Cleverly wins the rematch, I think Cleverly will go on to fight somebody we care about. If Bräumer wins the rematch, is he going to fight anybody? Is he going to fight the Kovalev Ward winner? Is he going to fight Adonis Stevenson? I don't think so. So who cares? We know Cleverly probably would take those fights, right? So hopefully that all gets sorted out. But also that same day, Joseph Parker scored a third-round knockout over Alexander Dimitrenko. And I thought this was an impressive win. It was a weird stoppage. It was one of those weird counts, and, you know, the writing was on the wall, right? It was, I can't remember exactly as I'm recording this, but it was a borderline punch, maybe to the back of the head or a push or something. But Dimitrenko had been hurt several times in the fight. The writing was on the wall. Impressive win for Joseph Parker, going up against a tall fighter. Now, obviously, that fighter doesn't look anything like Anthony Joshua or Deontay Wilder or Vladimir Klitschko, any of these other tall, athletic fighters. But the fact that Parker went in there with a taller, longer guy and took care of business, at this stage of his career, that's what he's supposed to do. He was in line to fight Anthony Joshua for his title next year. He had that mandatory position. But since Tyson Fury has vacated his titles, I guess I should have mentioned that before in my review of Dark-tober action, but Tyson Fury, with all his troubles, vacated his titles. So now Joseph Parker is lined up to fight Andy Ruiz, the undefeated American fighter, for the vacant WBO title in New Zealand on December 10th. December 10th has turned into a really good date in boxing with a lot of fights going on. Because that same day, again, Anthony Joshua is fighting Eric Molina. So, look, man, this is for a vacant title. Anthony Joshua, undefeated fighter. Andy Ruiz, undefeated fighter. New blood. We can also say that this title is pretty much a paper title. But I got to say this much. If you're comparing it to Anthony Joshua's title, he beat Charles Martin to win it. And Charles Martin beat Glaskov by a freak injury that wasn't even caused by a punch. So by rights, I mean, that title, it's so weak, that IBF heavyweight title. This WBO title, yeah, it's a vacant title that really should belong to Tyson Fury in the end, but it was stripped for legitimate reasons. Unlike the IBF title, right? This is the champion, Tyson Fury, giving up the title because of his issues right now with the drug abuse and all that. And this is two undefeated, top-ranked prospects going at it, fighting for this title. So you can claim, depending on how it all turns out, we'll see, but you can make the claim that this WBO heavyweight title, yeah, it's still paper, but it's a little bit thicker paper stock than an IBF heavyweight title. You can absolutely make that claim. And the WBA also is dropped by Tyson Fury. And you got to figure at some point that Luis Ortiz, who held a small piece of that at one point, might be in line for that one next year. So next year, we're going to have a completely blown up heavyweight division with 4 different titleists. But I think that's actually a good thing, because all these guys are going to start to fight each other over the next year or two. And I think it's going to be very, very exciting for the heavyweight division. Going down to the cruiserweight division, on October 15th, Tony Bellew scored a third-round TKO over BJ Flores in Liverpool. It was kind of his homecoming. There was a really big crowd there, very enthusiastic crowd. It was for this WBC cruiserweight title. Shit matchup. No one cares about that fight. What everyone cared about was that David Haye, who is helping call the fight for the TV network over there, Tony Bellew called him out right after the fight. In fact, he David Haye was down, beside the ring, and Tony Bellew got up against the ropes and talked a whole bunch of shit. And then even in the post-fight interview, talked even more shit. So there's talk that those two might fight next year. I don't particularly think that's a meaningful matchup. It doesn't mean anything for the heavyweight ratings or anything. I don't even rate David Haye right now. But as far as a domestic, big, entertaining fight that's going to do big numbers over there in the UK, it is meaningful. It's going to do business, and it's going to create some noise in the heavyweight division. So I think that fight's going to probably happen. I can absolutely see it happening. What that means for the cruiserweight division, I don't know. Will Tony Bellew drop that title? Will some of the other fighters, a couple of the fighters I talked about earlier, like Lebedev or Gassiev, Alexander Usyk, one of these guys, will they fight for that vacant title? I don't know. Either way, it's going to shake things up. It's going to make things pretty interesting. But that was it for all the action in October. Let's talk about the action coming up this week. Saturday, November 5th in Las Vegas inside the Thomas and Mack Center, or the Thomas and Wack Center, as some people call it, because I don't know why they're putting this card on there. It's off the strip. It's kind of whack. Manny Pacquiao going up against Jesse Vargas. And a lot of people groaned and moaned when this fight got announced, but at this stage with Top Rank and everything going on, I don't know who else they wanted to put Manny Pacquiao against. Of course, we'd rather see him in there with Terrence Crawford, and perhaps that fight can happen next year. But say what you will about Jesse Vargas, man. He gave Timothy Bradley all he could handle last year. He scored the upset win against Saddam Ali earlier this year to claim a vacant title earlier in March. You could make the argument that he's earned this shot at a faded, diminished version of Manny Pacquiao. This fight were happening 5 years ago against a prime Manny Pacquiao with a shit undercard. I think people would be a lot more upset. But looking at the size matchup, okay, to me, this just resembles Pacquiao's fight with Chris Algieri, okay? Pacquiao is almost 38 now. He's about 5'5", 67-inch reach. Jesse Vargas, 27 years old, 5'10", 77-inch reach. Much younger, much taller, much longer. So just from a body style perspective and the age gap and all that, it looks a lot like the Chris Algieri fight. Also, Pacquiao with that unorthodox southpaw style he has, darting in, darting out. He was able to shoot straight left hands down the middle and land them against Algieri, and I think he's going to be able to do that against Jesse Vargas. The difference here is I think Jesse Vargas is the more proven fighter. I think him getting very, very close to defeating Timothy Bradley and then scoring that upset knockout over Saddam Ali shows he has a lot more pop than Chris Algieri, and I think he's just a little bit better than him, and he's riding much, much higher, right? So it could look similar to that fight. I expect Manny Pacquiao to win a decision here. He might drop Vargas once or twice, but to this point, we haven't seen Vargas get hurt the way that we saw Chris Algieri get hurt, right? Leading up into that fight with Pacquiao. So I expect this thing to go all 12, but I think even this faded version of Manny wins a decision over Jesse Vargas. The question will be, who does he fight next? I'm not particularly interested in watching Manny Pacquiao. I've talked about that before, and some of you have said, why do I dislike Manny Pacquiao? I don't dislike him. Manny has been one of my favorite fighters of the last generation. I think that he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I rate him in an all-time great sense as more of like a lightweight. I think if in his prime, best years, if you're going back to 15-round fights, same-day weigh-ins and all that, he pretty much would have stacked up as a lightweight. He pretty much is still a blown-up lightweight, in my opinion. And I think he's an all-time great there. I think he's up there in the top 10 in that size category. But his time has passed, and unless next year he plans on fighting Terrence Crawford, I don't care. I just don't care, There was talk before about him fighting Danny Garcia or Adrian Broner. Danny Garcia now obviously is fighting Keith Thurman, and I think if he beats Keith Thurman, the winner of that fight is going to win the Floyd Mayweather sweepstakes, obviously toward the end of next year for Floyd's 50th win. But maybe Adrian Broner or something. That might be an interesting, fun kind of fight, but I don't think it has much meaning to it. There's just nobody else I want to see Manny fight except Terrence Crawford. So that's just how I feel about that fight. But this has a really, really good undercard. And I think that Top Rank and Bob Arum know that the pay-per-view model's changing in this sport. I think that Mayweather-Pacquiao destroyed it, blew it the fuck up, and it's never going to be the same again. And they've been stacking these undercards. And this one is no exception. So let's talk about a few of these fights. Okay, so first up on the untelevised portion of the undercard, which I believe this will be streamed on Top Rank's site, you're getting the pro debut of the Brazilian amateur standout, Robson Conceição. The three-time Olympian, he went to Beijing in 2008, London in 2012, and he won gold in Rio this year. He's going, I think, as a lightweight and a six-rounder. He might fight a little above lightweight, I don't know, but that's where he's going to settle in as a pro anyway. Going for a six-rounder, so it'll be interesting to see how he looks in his pro debut and how he translates into a professional. Zhou Shiming, Chinese flyweight, going up against a Thai fighter that he already beat once. They're doing a rematch. Prasiksak Phaprom. Yeah, Prasiksak Phaprom. Bam, nailed it. Maybe not. But this is for the vacant 112-pound title. For Phaprom, he's only fought outside of Thailand once, and that was in 2014 in Macau when he fought Zhou Shiming. And that was a title eliminator for the WBO. Was it the W? It might have been the IBF. It was a title eliminator for one of them. And Zhou Shiming won that fight. He pretty much, I think he dominated the Thai fighter. But then he went up against Amnat Ruenrueng, and he lost that fight pretty handedly, right? So he's already defeated this fighter once in a title eliminator. Now this is for a vacant title. And so this is basically a way for Top Rank to buy a title for Zhou Shiming. That makes him a lot more marketable back there in China, so they can do a few defenses over there. But make no mistake, you look at some of the class of the flyweight division, Zhou Shiming is not one of the elite flyweights in my opinion. He's good. He's a good top 10 flyweight. Is he elite? No. Oscar Valdez going up against a Japanese fighter, Hiroshige Asawa. And this is for the first defense of the WBO featherweight title that he won back on the Terrence Crawford-Victor Postol undercard earlier this summer. For those of you guys who haven't seen much of Oscar Valdez, very, very good fighter with a good future. He's 20-0 with 18 knockouts. I really still feel that, I won't say that he's a prospect. I think he's actually a contender now. He's a contender in that featherweight division, but that's a very, very strong division. He holds a title belt now. Several different title belts are spread all over the place. But, I don't want to call him a champion yet. He's a contender, but he's definitely one of the better, brighter, young contenders in those little weight divisions right now. He was a decorated Mexican amateur. He went to the Olympics in 2008 and 2012. You don't get many Mexican boxers going to the Olympics, going to multiple Olympics. So very, very decorated Mexican amateur, and he's translated very well to the pros. He's had some shaky moments where he's had to kind of grow up on the job. I remember he fought on the Bradley Vargas undercard against Ruben Tamayo, I think it was. Ruben Tamayo, and he was dropped early in that fight, and he had to get up off the canvas and come back, but he showed real mettle in that fight, and I just think there's something to the kid. So you should check that fight out if you can. And then Nonito Donaire going up against Jesse Magdaleno for the WBO 122-pound title. This is the title that Donaire won, the vacant title, back in 2015. So he's had a couple of defenses, I believe, and he's defending it against Magdaleno. For those of you who don't know much about Jesse Magdaleno, he's 23-0, 17 knockouts. He's only 24 years old, 5'4", 66-inch reach. He's actually the smaller guy in there against Donaire, who started at a lower weight and moved up. They just have different builds. Magdaleno's more shorter, stockier build. Donaire longer, taller. I think he's probably an inch longer, a couple inches longer reach, but he's much older. He's 33. And in terms of ring years, especially for a small fighter, he's a lot older. He is 4-0 with 3 knockouts since that loss to Nicholas Walters a couple years ago, which was, I believe, on the Golovkin-Rubio undercard. I think, yeah, back at StubHub at the end of 2014, I believe. So since that point, he's 4-0 with 3 knockouts. Hasn't been the best opposition, though. He certainly hasn't faced a young, hungry guy like Magdaleno like this in that time span. So it'll be interesting to see this matchup. I think it's a very, very strong co-feature. I think a fight like this could headline an HBO Latino card and be a co-headliner on an HBO Championship boxing card. This is a good matchup, man. It really, really is. So don't sleep on this fight. I want to pick Donaire because of experience, but part of me thinks that Jesse Magdaleno might wiggle himself into a controversial decision win here or something and snatch that title up. Don't be surprised. But that's it for this card. I think top to bottom, it's a good pay-per-view card. You guys decide if it's worth your money. Fortunately for me, I don't have to pay for the cards. So, it's hard for me to say, should you buy this one, should you not? If I felt like it was an outstanding value and there were no other cards coming up, I'd say absolutely. Comparing this card to Kovalev Ward, this card is a much, much better undercard. But Kovalev Ward is a much, much better main event. So you guys got to decide where's the best way to spend your money or watch on the internet, or as they call it now, the radio, if you know what I mean. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But let me know what you guys think. The Neutral Corner is back, baby. And we got a loaded November and December. Comment below, like, share, subscribe. I'll see you at the fights.